somehow you've been living under a rock and you've never heard of this film, horrific. However, hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Kelsey. I'm the creator of Bite Size Ancient History and a recent graduate of Cambridge University. At university, I studied classics at undergraduate and then Egyptology at master's level. So I thought I might try and use those skills and try and review our favourite films to decide whether they're historical fact or historical fiction. If that sounds like something you might be interested in, don't forget to like this video and subscribe and check out my other social media channels for other historical content generally. Today we're going to be talking about the film Raiders of the Lost Ark. I'm just going to preface this video like I do with all of my videos, but just because I'm saying it's historical fiction does not mean I'm critiquing the film generally. It could still be a very good film despite not being entirely accurate. But that is okay because I absolutely love this film. Despite its inaccuracies, I think it's one of the films that really got most archaeologists into their career today. As I'm obviously an ancient historian, I'm just going to be talking about the archaeology and Egyptological aspects, not the modern historical aspects of the film. I usually do a plot summary with my videos, but I feel like this film is popular enough that most of the people watching this video are gonna have seen the film. If not, I'll link a really good summary below. But if you don't feel like reading, I'm now going to give an actual 30-second summary so that you kind of know what's happening. You don't need to know any more details than this because unlike the other films we've looked at, this is set in the, well, not present day, but modern day history rather than ancient history, which is what we're going to be talking about. If somehow you've been living under a rock and you've never heard of this film or know nothing about it, it's generally an action kind of movie, like an action-adventure plotline. So it might be right up your street and you might want to go check it out. The overarching plot is this idea that the Nazis during World War II are trying to find the Ark of the Covenant, and they believe that this is going to give them power to help them win the war. Indiana Jones is a world-renowned archaeologist and kind of adventure guy, so he's going to go and find these artifacts, kill a lot of bad guys. So he gets recruited to basically go head-to-head with the Nazis to try and find the Ark of the Covenant before they do. So let's discuss this idea of the Nazi involvement in archaeology. You may be surprised to hear that this is actually really accurate. Prior to their defeat in World War I, the German community was not that interested in archaeology. However, with Hitler's and the Nazis' rise to power, they start to become very interested in it as a tool of nationalism and pro-Aryan propaganda. And you may be sitting and wondering, well,
how do you use archaeology for that?
However, this is actually a common trend in history. It wasn't just the Nazis. You also get recent Italian leaders doing the same with the Roman Empire. And they achieve this by kind of flexing the truth behind archaeology. Instead of going in with a hypothesis and trying to test and prove it, they really go in with the mindset of
this is what we're going to find and this is going to prove our beliefs.
Which kind of taints the information that you gain from an archaeological dig. So the mindset that they were going in with
is we're going to use this to prove that the Aryan race is the one true and pure and fantastic race.
Horrific. One key archaeologist behind this, where the Nazis really adopt his ideas, is a man named Gustav Kostner. In his writings, he presented Germany to be the origin of all civilizations, making them the one pure race. Another one of his ideas that feed into this is this idea of culture circles. This is the idea that wherever we find German or Germanic artifacts, it is representative of the idea that they were once there and that is their true land. It must belong to them now to try and regain this power and what truly belongs to them. They believed that it was wrongfully stolen and they needed to gain this again. And a key example of this would be countries like Poland. This idea was reinforced by the key tenet that what was in history is correct. So whatever happened in the past is what should be now, and that it's just a degradation that... and that it's just declined as history has progressed. And that's why we see old Germanic symbols being used a lot in their propaganda as well. So obviously most iconically would be the swastika. And this was actually a symbol from Germanic tribes, alongside other ancient communities as well. As I mentioned briefly before, prior to this, the Germans did not care about archaeology, and this kind of played to their advantage because it meant they could just say whatever they wanted, and most people were not educated enough to know that that was wrong. They took it as truth, because when you get leading politicians and scholars saying these things, you're going to be like, okay, seems legit. I mean, you would, but not great. So, we have established that this was a theme, but what about the Ark of the Covenant? Were they really searching for these religious and semi-mythical relics, depending on your perspective? Unfortunately, we don't have any accounts saying they specifically searched for the Ark of the Covenant. However, before you get too upset, what they actually did was even more ridiculous. So while there's obviously communities that truly believe in the presence of the Ark of the Covenant and other religious relics, as a community, as a globe, we're all generally agreed on the fact that Atlantis is an outlandish myth. There's not a lot of fact there. Like, I would say most of the public believes this. However, the Nazis did not. They may not have searched for the Ark of the Covenant, but they searched for Atlantis. They wanted to try and prove that whatever civilization was in Atlantis was Germanic, and then therefore they were the true, leading, amazing race. Yeah. It's a little bit crazy. And this is not all. They also searched for religious relics, but for specifically the Holy Grail, because again, they thought they could harness its power in some way, and if they laid claim to that, they would become more powerful. They also searched for Thor's hammer. Yeah. It was an interesting period, to say the least. And when I say searched, it wasn't like they were just sending off their little, henchmen to go find this. Is in some of the top leaders themselves, like Himmler himself, went out on these excavations to find the Holy Grail.
It's bold.
Is bold, given the fact that's less than 100 years ago, and they were like, this is fact. We're believing this is pure fact, and we're going to use it. Let's talk about the portrayal of the Ark of the Covenant itself. I'm not going to share my personal beliefs of what I do believe and what I don't believe. That is entirely up to you, and that's fine. I am just going to present you with what the Bible describes it as and what archaeological evidence we have. So the Ark is described in the book of Exodus, and it feels like this book is going to come up a lot in my videos, and you will have seen it in my Prince of Egypt video, so go check that one out as well for a little bit more detail on this. In this book, it is described as a golden wooden chest, and the film pretty much does show it like that. It also says that it's got an elaborate decorated lid, and yeah, it does. That's pretty accurate. The Bible also does reveal it to be a very powerful object. For example, when the priests were transporting it, it dried up the River Jordan. So that's pretty powerful. It also brought with it plagues when the Philistines stole it from the Israelites. And finally, and most importantly, it also states that men who touched it or even just looked at it were struck dead. So at the end of the movie, spoiler alert if you haven't seen it yet, I will tell you where to skip to. The Nazis are killed by this. While the Bible doesn't say that it's quite in the spectacular fashion that we see in the film, because there's a lot of explosions, a lot of face melting. The Bible can't account for that, but for the deaths generally, kind of justified. However, beyond this, they may ham up the powers of the Ark just a little bit, but as a Hollywood film, kind of justified. It's what we expect at this stage. So in the film, the character Brody talks about how it is a radio to speak to God. Nothing about that. That's nothing. Also talks about how it can level mountains with its power, and I guess this might just be like a metaphor for how powerful it is, but it's not quite accurate. And unfortunately, when it comes to any archaeological evidence of the Ark, we're left wanting a bit more. There are some archaeologists since the Nazi era that have tried to continue to pursue these religious relic archaeological digs, but there hasn't been any convincing evidence, unfortunately. I think the best example for any religious relics is the fact that when we talk about the cross of Jesus that he's crucified on, so many churches and cathedrals lay claim to the fact that they've got a little bit of it, and you're like, realistically, how many of you actually do? And I think that's the kind of mindset you need to approach with religious archaeology. And I guess that may be because the stakes are so high, so more people are likely to fabricate it because they want it to be true so much. But from an archaeological science perspective, it's a dodgy area you just avoid. Obviously, as a movie where its protagonist is an archaeologist, there's a lot we can talk about archaeologically. However, most of it I have already covered in previous videos. So specifically, archaeological methods of the early 20th century, you can find in my mummy review video, which I talked about in a lot more detail. So I'm not going to bother repeating it because those of you who have seen that video are just going to get bored. So go check that out if that is something that you find interesting. When the archaeologists that are on the good guys team come and approach Indiana Jones with this task, they say that they think the Ark of the Covenant is in Tanis. I'm very excited to tell you that Tanis was a real ancient Egyptian city. It's actually just located northeast of the Nile Delta. They obviously describe it as being discovered officially by this team of German archaeologists. That is when we start to get a little bit less true. It was actually discovered around the same time period in 1939 by a French archaeologist named Pierre Montet. Again, unfortunately, the film says it's destroyed and lost by a sandstorm. This is not true. It was just simply abandoned during the Roman period of Egypt. And if you're not familiar with Egyptian timelines, I'll do a little brief summary now because this is going to help you with a lot of future videos. So we have our pre-dynastic period as our earliest period of Egyptian history, followed by proto-dynastic, and then we have our Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, New Kingdom. We then have the periods where the Greeks invade, and then finally when it's annexed by Rome in the Roman period. So this is the last period of Egyptian history. Again, as you can predict, as we've deviated a little bit from historical fact now, there is no map room in Tanis that will secretly reveal the location of the Ark of the Covenant. Obviously, you could say it's all a massive conspiracy in the fact that they did find it and then covered it up, but I think, realistically, no. There's generally no reference to the Ark and no reference to the Well of Souls where they say that they find the Ark in the film. What about the Staff of Ra? Again, if you're not familiar, they have the head of this staff in the film where you shine light through it if you have the staff of the correct length, and it will reveal to you the location of the Well of Souls and therefore the location of the Ark of the Covenant. Not real. Not real at all. Ra, is a very real Egyptian god, which is great, tick. I think a lot of you will have heard of it, especially from movies like The Mummy, where you hear about the Book of Amun-Ra, which is this hybridized deity. So Ra is just a very real Egyptian sun god. And yes, he did have a staff, and I'll show you a picture here. If you've seen the film, you know that the film does not look like this. What Ra actually carries is a scepter called the Wa's scepter, and this also appears in Egyptian hieroglyphs, which, if you know how to read hieroglyphs, you know about the fluidity of the fact it being depicted and then also appearing in its language. This is a symbol of dominion and power. It has a little forked kind of prong at the end of the staff and then a stylized animal head on top. So in the film, the little amulet that we find for the head of the staff is completely inaccurate, unfortunately. It was just kind of a way, I guess, to move the plot along. Sorry. Finally, let's talk a little bit about the art and design of the film. Specifically, we find a lot that we can talk about in this mythical map room. The general style of the art on the walls is pretty real. This looks like most of the depictions that we would find. The one issue is obviously map rooms didn't exist, so you don't know what they're going to look like. But I'm a little bit confused as to why they look more like funerary depictions, because I don't know who's dead and buried here. It's a little bit confusing. So specifically you find Osiris in there, and it's a little bit weird. The stylized art that's kind of representative of ancient Egypt gets thrown completely out the window when they finally find the location of the Ark, and they open it up and you see these 4 Anubis statues looking up and screaming out, and I will show you depictions of Anubis and none of them look like this cartoon weird thing. Like, I don't know why they did that, because there are cool statues of Anubis, like as we've seen in films like The Mummy, that are accurate. Why they did that, I don't know. But as a cool final point to end it on, in one scene you see lots of hieroglyphs in the background, and the general hieroglyphic symbols are accurate. I haven't managed to find a good screenshot where I can try and translate any of it, so I don't know how accurate it is in that respect. I'm guessing not, because the cool fact is that you can find a hieroglyph that's made to look like R2-D2 and C-3PO. And I'll show you now. I think that's a cool fact and a little cool Easter egg. And unfortunately, that is all we're going to have time for today. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and check out my other social media channels, and I'll see you next week. Bye!